We're here, we're doing it.
Yep.
We're getting to our podcast, Getting Real with Rose. How you feeling?
A little nervous. You know, we're trying to make this right and work, and and this is different.
Definitely different. Do you want to do a little grounding exercise for us?
So one day I'll explain grounding, but this is stomach meridian, which is the first point on our stomach, which is and a meridian is an energy line through our body. This one goes all the way down to our second toe.
And this one pulls energy from
above,
yeah,
and brings it all the way down. And then the next one we're going to do is on the chest. It's underneath your collarbone in the center, and then you can feel a divot. And that's the last point in kidney. And that's bringing our energy up from the bottom of our foot.
So like from the earth.
From the earth. And then spleen is the last point for spleen. And this is how our body processes our thoughts, our food, everything. It's the spleen is such a hard-working organ. I feel better. How about you?
I feel better too.
Okay.
So let's start with a brief introduction. Do you want to introduce
Yeah.
yourself?
Rose Hilbert, and I am the owner of the Inn and Spa at Gothic Eves in Trumansburg, New York. I've been here for 29 years, 62, and I am proud of it. Got my gray hair to show and my wrinkles. And you, Madeline, what about you? Who are you?
So I'm Madeline. I am 23 years old, and I am the social media manager, and I also am a content creator for the Inn at Gothic Eves, also with the help of my awesome brother Alex, who also helps create content here.
Yes.
I am also a singer, a dancer, work with kids, so I kind of do a whole bunch of things.
It's creative.
I would encompass it in I'm a creative. So we are filming our first podcast ever, and this has been very big and very different and very exciting for us. Do you want to talk about why we decided to start this podcast?
Yeah. So the podcast gave birth in many conversations after creating reels and Instagram content, and we seem to have a lot to say to each other, and we seem to, despite the age difference, there's a thread that we seem to also hold together, and so it just came very natural for us to speak with each other. But I thought we had lots of interesting things to talk about too. I think we're interesting people too. So really the composition, the reason to start this is many, but mostly sharing. You go through 62 years and you have all this experience, and you've fallen into holes, you've been married, you've been divorced, you've been all these things. I learned from others. So it seemed like I should make and give all of the struggles and successes a little bit of air on how not to step in that hole, or it's not all perfect, or lots of things.
Yeah. And I think we unintentionally we scratched the surface of that when we started making content together.
Yeah.
You know, we did like little interview sections and fun reels and reels of the inn and photos and stuff like that. And I think you'll probably agree with this, but we both felt like there was more to be shown and shared that we didn't really get to grasp with like the shorter content. And with Instagram and TikTok and all these other platforms right now, short is good. Short functions.
Right.
So I think giving us the space to go into depth and discuss more of the things that you enjoy and that you've learned, and that I enjoy and that I've learned, was definitely the next step for both of us in a direction that we were excited about. So
why don't you tell them our Instagram account?
Oh, it's the Inn at Gothic Eves.
Yeah.
Go follow us. We post a lot of fun stuff. We're always having a good time. Well, not always, but like when we make content, we're having a good time.
Yeah, it's some of my favorite days. And the website for the inn is www.gothiceves.com.
Getting Real with Rose, the name of our podcast.
Yeah. Getting real has a meaning of it's not all fun. It's not all organized. It isn't all easy. It's stressful. It's constant, and it's rewarding. It's all those things. So when you go to our the Inn at Gothic Eves Instagram account, you're going to see parts, the positive parts, maybe some negative parts, but you're going to see us doing things and feeling, and that's all true. But there's another side to all of that. And as much fun as you see us having is as much struggle and an effort it takes to make that happen. Yeah. So we have great days and good days and even days and bad days, just like everybody else. And that's what's getting real. Yeah. I don't want to be part of the problem of people thinking that it's perfect here. It's my illusion. Yeah. I do a really good job at creating an illusion, but there's bad days. Yeah.
And so Getting Real with Rose is really just about showing the whole picture, and not just the good things, and how the negative things end up bringing us to the good things, and there's darkness and light and other way around. So so how you got into innkeeping, this is really a story of a lifetime.
Yeah, it is.
I want to really hear the full story. And that starts in childhood, the root of everything, right?
The podcast listeners should probably get a cup of coffee.
Yeah, this might take a while. But do you want to start with that growing up? What was that like for you?
I was one of 5 kids. I was the middle child, says an awful lot about me. I was the first daughter. My dad was a teacher, and my mom stayed home for all of us. Very difficult job. There was a lot to my mom, but I believe that she held the housekeeping mom occupation, and she did an exceptional job of that. And I was born in Maryland, just about 20 miles northeast of Baltimore. So I was out in a rural area. My first home was, they would have called it a condominium. A townhouse. But it was then called row houses. And it was across the street from a dairy farm. And then my rest of my life in Maryland was on the other side of the dairy farm at a house. Let's see, what else? I went to a Catholic grade school, and that was interesting. Uniforms, the works. And
what was the energy of that like for you?
Yeah, small classes. I went to school in first grade, never did kindergarten, none of that stuff. There were 30 kids about in each class, not each first grade class, but all of first grade was 30 kids, and the second grade was 30. And so I went in school, going to school with the same 30 children all the way to 8th grade. Wow. So there were only 8 classrooms in the school. So recess was on a paved parking lot. Sounds like a song. And right? And nuns, lots of nuns. There were lay people there too. But I enjoyed school. But I didn't have very many friends. It seemed to be one of the things that I struggled with in the beginning of my life.
Yeah.
So.
And then going into like college and things like that.
Well, you can't skip over high school.
Oh yeah, tell us about high school. Sorry.
Oh my gosh. Well, high school was a very different thing. It was a private school. There was a priest that was the principal, and there were nuns there, Notre Dame nuns, but lots of lay people. And it was much more about excellence. It was a college preparatory school. So uniforms and discipline, but the education was exceptional. In college, I went to University of Maryland, but in college, they never came close to challenging me like high school. So I would say that high school was very much part of making me, pulling me, the best of me, and pushing me to be my best.
That's good.
Yeah, high schools usually don't do that. They usually leave lots of scars. But
That's
me,
relatable.
yeah, but it wasn't that for me. Not very many friends again, but still just the ability to just spread my wings and be as much as I could fill. And then when that wasn't enough for them, they wanted more. I somehow, came up with more. So, yeah.
That's great.
Yep.
So college.
College. So high school kind of got me involved with the environmental science part. So I went to college, the University of Maryland, in environmental science, and worked there for 2.5 years and got a job at EPA, which was 3 miles away. And
Can you tell us what EPA is?
EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency of our government. And it was a student job. It was called 1040 because 1040 is half-time. And we got paid student rate. But I didn't care. I wanted to work there. And right before I got in to start my first day, they riffed all of EPA from that station. It was the main place. It was the base place for EPA. They riffed it, which is a pink slip for everybody. And they literally closed the facility. They closed the gates. They put a lock on it, and they wrote "rift" across the sign. And I was devastated.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah. So my job was gone, and then I did a lateral. I just went over to USDA, which was on the same main campus in Beltsville, Maryland. And I rode my bike every day and worked there. That was pretty cool. I worked in the strawberry, blueberry labs mostly.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, small fruits. Yeah.
And then where'd you go from there?
So I got a full-time job at
Okay.
USDA as a tech. And somewhere in there, they decided that there was more to me. Do you see the pattern? And they decided to offer me the ability to go to school and get a master's degree.
Oh, yeah.
And keep my job, be paid full-time for my job, go to school full-time, and they were going to pay for the school too, graduate school. Wow, that was awesome.
Yeah.
Day before, it took me almost a year to get into University of Maryland graduate department, and I was going to horticulture. And I went to get my check to pay my bill, registered my classes, and I walked into the department head's office, and he said, there's no money for you to do this. The day before I was starting classes.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, little sign there. So I decided maybe I was just go back to school.
Yeah.
And they thought I was that good. So I thought, okay, I'm still that good. I'm going to school. So in one day, I went right back to campus. I walked around, said, will you just take me as a student? And can you give me an assistant, like a teaching assistant or a research assistant? There were none left in the horticulture department. Went to botany department, found one. And in one day, I was horticulture, and the next day I was in botany in a genetic lab.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
And then from there, you, I know you did some work in like a garden center of some sort.
Yeah, so
How did you end up from working in the botany department to then?
Yeah, getting my degree. So I was getting my degree. I worked like a grunt at a garden center. It was a privately owned one. It was called Solar Gardens. It had a passive solar greenhouse that heated itself in the winter. And I was a landscape grunt, watering plants, mulching beds, and graduated with my master's degree. And I was offered a job at the garden center as a manager.
Because what was your other option?
Oh, Monsanto.
Yeah.
I was being offered a job from Monsanto, and some deep down inside me said, this is before Monsanto had a bad reputation.
Yeah.
Something told me no. A
Interesting.
big no. And I went with no and got that job at the garden center, and then got fired eventually. That's another story. And then worked at another garden center and started like looking around, and the National Institutes of Health in Bethesda, Maryland offered me a job in an office. It was a resource place, so I
Okay.
got to read all kinds of research. It wasn't
Yeah.
just infectious disease, it was everything. Yeah,
Sounds interesting,
it is.
but not quite what you ended up wanting to do.
No, I hated getting dressed. Well, I like getting dressed up, but I hated walking around in heels. I hated spending money on fancy clothes to look like the part. I didn't want to be inside.
Corporate life.
I know. I was on the 8th floor. I ended up taking over that whole office and all the people in it. And they were giving me pay raises, and I hated it. I hated it. Yeah.
And then,
Yes, my
And
daughter,
then
first
yeah.
daughter was born, Anna. And daycare was okay because I had a great daycare person till I didn't. And then it was awful. And it was unacceptable. And I worked really hard to figure out how to get out of there. And I was married then. We together came up with finding a job somewhere else and me finding work at home. And found Cornell was offered him a job, and I found this home, and this was one of 3 things I wanted to do at home. And so, yeah.
and how did you come up with that? Like, were you just sitting with it? Like,
No, that was very calculated. So we went to a bed and breakfast and sat in this great old huge smokehouse with a big fire, and we made a list of all the things that we liked doing and things we thought we were really good at. And then we took our list home after the weekend and asked all our friends what they thought we were good at and what they thought we liked. And wherever those threads crossed over, that's what we went with. So we both liked entertaining. We both liked being social. We both liked gardening and fixing things up. We love old houses. I mean, and I wanted to be home to raise Anna.
right.
So found this house. It was perfect. The garden center wouldn't have worked here. There's not enough summer here. There's not enough heat. Well, there might be soon, but there's not enough heat in New York.
Was a garden center another idea that you
Yes,
were thinking
and
of?
then tissue culture. I was thinking about getting plants into cellular form and propagating them, and there were going to be natives to go ahead and go out and plant out in the forest to reforest areas that were being ruined.
3 completely different paths.
Yes.
So you found this house.
Yes.
How did you end up in Trumansburg? And
Yeah.
like,
This house was empty. It had leaves all through. It had no furniture, had a lamp in some of the rooms on the floor lit. It was not a great showing. And I walked in the front door, and I swear I had been here before. And I swear I just knew this was my house. I've had that feeling in other places, where the other house that I have now. I walk into some places, and it's a knowing. I just know I've been here. It's the right place to be. It brought up all this elation and joy in me. And it was dark and cold, and there was nothing really to talk about. It didn't look like this. Yeah.
Wow, that's incredible. So
Yep.
you just went with that.
I did.
With that feeling.
I did.
So how did the inn develop from there? So you had this house.
Yeah.
And then what did you do with this place?
Yeah, so it had 4 rooms.
Okay.
And the 5th bedroom was our bedroom, and we shared it with our daughter. Interesting time. And then expanded. We built a 5th room on the 1st floor, and because 4 rooms technically, statistically, will not pay your bills. 5 rooms is really where your work and your input equals more your output.
Yeah.
So we went with that, and then the house next door, the owner passed, and I said, hey, if you're interested, we're here. We might consider buying that. And they came over and we bought it, and we gave them what they wanted, because it was next door.
Yeah.
You can't do next door unless it's next door. So we paid for it. It was a mess. It was rotted. It was nothing like this house. We totally rebuilt it. Wow. So we went from one house, 4 rooms, to 2 houses, 8 rooms, a spa, and an apartment for our family, because Rachel was born the first year we were here. Yeah. So we had 2 kids and us and a dog, and we needed an apartment. So what
were some of the challenges that came up for you?
Paying for it.
Yeah.
When we bought that house, we had permission to go forward with making it a bed and breakfast.
Yeah.
This was a bed and breakfast. Now we call it an inn, but and then when we took the house apart and we had a backhoe underneath the original house, and the original house was 1 inch off of the ground because they were going to rebuild a foundation and a floor. Wow. Rainy day, and the code zoning guy comes up, and at that moment he comes and he says, I don't think this is going to work. And I refuse to compromise.
It's a great lesson for to never settle, because look at
I know. There is a lot of stories there, many podcasts, but it all worked out.
Yeah.
It all worked out.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
From the city to a small town, owning a successful business, and you've been doing it for 29 years. That's quite the journey. With all that being said, you have a lot of knowledge and a lot of information and a lot of value to share with people. So that's something that we'll get into over the next couple episodes. We'll be covering things from innkeeping to owning a business and owning a business as a woman, challenges, advice, spirituality in business and how they play in together. Finally, energy medicine. Thank you for being here, and stay tuned for more.